This happened a few years ago when I was in my early 20s working nights as an armed security guard to pay my way through college. The shifts were long, 7 p.m. to 3 a.m., and that night I remember feeling drained. My plan was simple. Clock out, grab a bottle of soda for a friend I was visiting the next day, and head home. It was around 3:30 in the morning when my shift ended. I tossed my pistol belt and holster onto the back seat instead of locking them in the trunk like I was supposed to. It was a lazy habit. That mistake probably saved my life. The neighborhood I lived in wasn't terrible, but it wasn't safe either. There was a small convenience store tucked into a strip mall off the main road. One flickering streetlight tried to illuminate the cracked asphalt of the parking lot. It never really did. The air was cold and still, the kind of quiet that hums in your ears. I parked near the entrance, went inside, and bought the soda. When I stepped back out, the lot was empty except for a few scattered cars under the dull orange light. That's when I saw her. She came stumbling from behind the closed doctor's offices across the lot. A young woman, maybe my age, with shoulder-length blonde hair and a white shirt patterned with small pink flowers. She was running toward me, barefoot, clutching something in her hand. At first, I thought it was a gun. My pulse spiked. Then she shouted, "He's following me!" Her voice cracked. Raw panic, not performance. I froze beside my car. "He's following me," she said again, almost pleading. And that's when I heard it. A sharp, electric crack. A stun gun. Not a firearm, but close enough to make my heart pound harder. She held it out in front of her, trembling. I scanned the parking lot. "Who's following you?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes darted over my shoulder. Then I saw him. He stepped into the light like he'd been waiting for the right moment. Tall, 6'4", maybe taller, broad-shouldered, bald head shining under the street lamp. He wore a blue tank top that showed arms like heavy rope. And in his right hand, a knife. Not a pocket knife, a hunting blade. Big, ugly, meant for cutting something that can bleed. "That's my piece," he said. His voice was low, calm. He didn't look at me. His eyes were fixed on the girl. He kept walking, boots scraping the asphalt, steady, purposeful. The girl shook her head at me, almost crying now. "He's following me." I told her to go inside the store, to tell the clerk to call 911. She nodded and ran, her shoes slapping against the pavement. The man didn't care. He just kept coming. "That's my piece." 15 feet away now. The streetlight flickered above us, throwing his shadow long across the cracked pavement. I reached into my back seat, grabbed my pistol belt, and fastened it as quickly as I could. When I turned back toward him, I shifted my hips so he could see the gun on my side. My hand rested on the grip, steady but ready. He didn't stop, didn't even blink. "That's my piece," he said again. I drew my weapon and leveled it at his chest. "Here's my piece," I told him. He stopped, but the knife stayed up. His eyes locked on mine, flat and unreadable. The parking lot felt smaller now, like the world had closed in around just the two of us. I could feel my pulse in my teeth. "How about you go on your way," I said quietly, "and have a good night." No reaction, just that dull stare, knife glinting in the half-light. I didn't want to shoot him. I'd seen death before, Army infantry, a few years overseas. It leaves something in you that never washes out. And the thought of pulling that trigger here in some grimy strip mall parking lot over a stranger's madness, it felt wrong. I cocked the hammer. The click broke the silence like a gunshot. "Go on your way," I repeated, "and have a good night." For a moment, I thought he'd charge. Then he blinked, just once. and something in his face shifted. "Sorry, man," he said softly. "Thought you were somebody else." He lowered the knife, tucked it into the back of his waistband, and started backing away. His eyes never left mine until he turned toward the convenience store, the same one the girl had run into. I kept my gun raised until he disappeared inside. Then I finally exhaled. My hands were shaking when I holstered the weapon. I sat in my car for a moment, heart still hammering, the unopened soda sitting on the passenger seat like some ridiculous afterthought. Across the street, a second convenience store glowed under a brighter set of lights, and out front sat a sheriff's cruiser. I decided to tell him what happened. The deputy was leaning against his car, sipping coffee. I walked up, still trying to steady my voice. "Officer, there's a guy over there." "Bald guy? Blue tank top?" he interrupted. I froze. "Yeah. How'd you?" He nodded, setting his cup on the hood. "We've been looking for him." He didn't wait for more. He jumped in his cruiser, flipped on the lights, and tore across the lot toward the store. The tires squealed, echoing off the empty buildings. I watched until his headlights vanished. Then I got back in my car and drove home. The drive was silent, no radio, no thoughts really. Just the soft hum of the tires and the streetlights sliding past the windshield. I never found out what happened after that, to her or to him. The police never called, and I never asked. But I still remember that parking lot. The broken light, the way the air felt thick and heavy, and the sound of his voice, calm, rehearsed, as he walked toward me with that knife. Sometimes late at night, I catch myself replaying that moment, the instant before I drew my gun, and I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't left it on the back seat, if I'd followed protocol, if I'd been just a little more careful. It's strange how the things that save your life can start as small, careless mistakes, and how a quiet night in an empty parking lot can change the way you see silence forever. I worked private security for a few retail stores on the edge of Salinas, California. It was a quiet area most of the time. Long, empty parking lots bordered by open fields and half-abandoned warehouses. We dealt with small things, shoplifters, trespassers, the occasional teenager trying to sleep in their car overnight. Nothing serious, but that changed one cold morning in March of 2019. It was the 24th, a Sunday. My shift started at 6 a.m. The air still had that sharp winter bite to it, the kind that slips through your jacket and sits in your lungs. The sun hadn't fully come up yet, just a pale glow touching the horizon. I got into the company truck and started my patrol of the back lot, the stretch that ran behind the Walmart Supercenter. That place was massive, surrounded by cracked asphalt and concrete loading bays. It was always empty back there. Just a few rusted carts, some old pallets, and a couple of vehicles that hadn't moved in months. But that morning, something caught my eye. Near the far corner, half hidden behind a concrete pillar, was a small gray Honda Civic. It sat at an odd angle, the front wheels crooked between the faded white lines. I'd seen that car before, once or twice, maybe more. I'd always figured it belonged to someone working long shifts or someone down on their luck, sleeping in their car for the night. That wasn't unusual in that part of town. But this time, something was different. The windows were fogged on the inside, but coated with dust on the outside, like they hadn't been wiped in weeks. The tires were low. Cobwebs stretched from the mirrors to the concrete barrier beside it. I stopped the truck about 15 feet away and rolled the window down. A faint smell drifted in. At first, I thought it was the dumpsters nearby, but this was different, thicker, sweet and sour at the same time. It made my stomach tighten. I stepped out, my boots crunching on bits of gravel, and walked toward the car. The closer I got, the worse the smell became. It hung in the air like a fog you could taste. I called out, "Hello? Security? You all right in there?" No answer. I moved to the driver's side window. The glass was so dirty I could barely see through it. The wiper blades had fused to the windshield. I leaned close, shielding my eyes from the morning sun. And that's when I saw it. Through the haze, just barely visible, was something pale slumped across the front seat. At first, I thought it was a blanket, or maybe a mannequin. Stores sometimes use them for safety drills. But then my brain caught up. It wasn't a thing. It was a person, a woman. She was sitting upright, her head tilted back against the seat, her hands folded neatly in her lap. The skin of her face had a strange, grayish color, still, dry. Even through the fogged glass, I could see she hadn't moved in a long time. I stepped back fast. My heart was pounding. The air around me felt heavier. I grabbed my radio, tried to steady my voice. Unit 3 requesting immediate police response. Possible deceased occupant in a vehicle. Back lot, east corner. Those 30 seconds waiting for a response felt like hours. 10 minutes later, a patrol car rolled up. Lights flashing. The officers took one look at the car and started taping off the area. When they opened the driver's door, the smell hit everyone at once. It was like the air turned solid, thick, suffocating. One of the officers covered his nose and muttered quietly, "Yeah, she's been here a while." Detectives showed up soon after. I gave my statement while they worked around the car. They covered the windows with blue tarps, took photos, marked evidence. I remember standing there, feeling useless, watching them move around that gray Civic like it was a crime scene from a dream. When they were done, one of the officers came over. He looked tired. He told me her name, Lauren Cho, 22 years old, reported missing 3 months earlier. She'd been sitting there the entire time, right there, in that parking lot, through the rain and the cold, while people parked, shopped, and went home just a few feet away. The officer said it was the car's position, the tinted glass, and how little that section of the lot was used. No one noticed. Nobody looked long enough to see her. When the coroner's team arrived, they carefully opened the back door to remove her remains. Inside, they found a small purse on the passenger seat, a half-empty water bottle. Her phone long dead. No signs of foul play. No struggle. Just a young woman who'd gone missing one night and never woken up. I watched them zip the bag, carry it to the van, and close the doors. That sound, the latch of the van door sealing, still echoes in my mind. For weeks after, I couldn't stop seeing her there. The angle of her head, the way the early sunlight hit the windshield. It burned into me. The company moved me to another patrol route for a while, but it didn't help. Every time I saw a parked car, I found myself slowing down, checking the windows, looking for stillness. The Civic was eventually towed away after the investigation, but the oil stains stayed. For months, you could still see the shape of where the tires had rested. People kept parking in that same spot. Families loading groceries into their trunks. Teenagers leaning on the bumpers, scrolling their phones. All of them standing on top of a story they'd never know. When her case made the local news, I watched the broadcast from home. Her parents spoke. They said they'd searched every nearby city, called hospitals, posted flyers. They couldn't understand how she'd been there all along. None of us could. It wasn't just tragedy that stuck with me. It was how easy it was to miss her. How something so final, so absolute, could hide in plain sight for months. Now, every time I patrol a lot at night and see an old car sitting alone under a flickering light, I feel it again, that same pull in my chest. The silence, the smell of cold air and asphalt, and the knowledge that sometimes the scariest things aren't lurking in shadows. They're right in front of you, and nobody ever looks long enough to see them. I used to work night security at a mid-sized office complex outside Sacramento. 3 buildings, 2 lots, and a small loading dock out back. Nothing special. Most nights were quiet, just the hum of vending machines and the echo of my footsteps in empty halls. The job was simple. Walk the grounds, check doors, and make sure no one was hanging around after hours. For a while, it almost felt peaceful. Almost. There's something about those places after midnight. The way the light looks, flat and yellow. The way sound carries down long hallways that should be silent. You start to feel like the building's breathing around you. That feeling never bothered me until the winter of 2021. It was late December, cold enough that the air burned when I inhaled. The city had just lifted some restrictions, so most of the offices were empty except for a few late workers in the tech building. I clocked in at 11, grabbed my flashlight, and started my first patrol. The upper lot was clear, the side doors were locked. When I reached the lower parking lot, the one that backed up against a small patch of trees, I noticed a car idling near the far end. That wasn't normal. No one stayed that late except employees with clearance, and even they didn't linger. I shone my light toward the car, an older sedan, dark blue, maybe a Honda. The headlights were off, but I could see the faint glow of a phone screen inside. At first, I thought it was just someone waiting to pick up a coworker, so I walked down the slope toward it, keeping my light low. But as I got closer, I realized something was off. The car's engine wasn't running. The faint light I'd seen wasn't a phone. It was a cigarette. And the man holding it wasn't sitting in the driver's seat. He was standing beside the car, staring toward the building. I stopped about 20 feet away. My boots scraped against the asphalt, and the man turned, slow, deliberate. He was tall, maybe 6'2", thin, wearing a faded jacket that hung loose on him. The cigarette ember glowed just enough to catch his eyes. "Sir," I called out, keeping my tone calm. "This is private property. You can't be here." He didn't answer, just stood there, watching me. I tried again. "Sir, I need you to move along." That's when he smiled. Barely. Just a twitch at the corner of his mouth. He dropped the cigarette, crushed it under his heel, and started walking toward me. Something about the way he moved set every nerve in my body on edge. It wasn't a drunk stumble or a confident stride. It was slow, steady, almost rehearsed. I raised my light. "That's far enough." He stopped about 10 feet away. The beam hit his face fully now. Pale skin, hollow cheeks, eyes sunken and wide. No expression left. Just that faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. Then quietly, he said, "They're gone now." His voice was flat, like he was talking to himself. I swallowed hard. "Who's gone?" He didn't blink. "Everyone," he said. "All of them." For a moment, we just stood there in the cold air, the light between us like a wall. Then, without another word, he turned and walked toward the trees. I followed him with the light until the darkness swallowed him completely. I waited, expecting to hear twigs snap, leaves crunch, something. But there was nothing, just silence. I stood there longer than I should have, scanning the tree line. Finally, I backed away and called it into dispatch. They told me to stay in my vehicle until a unit arrived. When the police got there, we searched the trees. Nothing. No footprints, no cigarette butt, not even tire tracks from the car I thought I saw. It was like he'd never been there. They told me it was probably a transient. Maybe slipped out another way. But the way that man looked at me, it didn't feel random. It felt like he'd been waiting. After that night, I started noticing little things. Sometimes I'd find the lower lot gate unlocked even though I'd sealed it myself. Other times, I'd catch faint movement on the cameras. A shadow between the cars, gone before I could focus. One night, I asked the day shift guard if he'd ever seen anything strange down there. He paused for a long time before answering. Then he said, "About a year ago, yeah. Some guy got found in that patch of trees. Overdose, I think. Been there for days before anyone noticed." I asked when that happened. He told me the date, December 24th. The same night I saw the man. I didn't say anything after that, but I couldn't shake the image. The way he looked standing under that dim security light, the smoke curling around his face, the emptiness in his voice. I lasted another few months at that job before I transferred out. By then, I'd stopped walking the lower lot altogether. I'd drive past, windows rolled up, and glance toward the trees, just once, before turning away. The company eventually installed new lights and cameras down there. They said it was to improve visibility for patrol. But the last time I drove by, long after I'd left the job, I noticed something. The lights in that section, just that section, kept flickering, bright, then dim, over and over, and beneath that broken glow, there was still a single dark spot on the asphalt, shaped like the outline of a car. Sometimes I wonder if anyone else sees it, or if maybe some part of him never left. Because every December since then, around the same hour, that corner of the lot still goes quiet. The air feels heavier, and when the wind moves through the trees, it sounds almost like footsteps, walking away again.